Coming up, it's one of the darkest days of one of the rock era's most storied bands. Already known for having more than their fair share of secrets and intrigue and infighting, this tragic day took their brand of musical mayhem to an entirely new level. It left one band member fearing for her life, and another just outright quit the band. They just finished their 5th studio album together. It would be one of their biggest. They managed to write a song on this album that's so magical, so joyful, even happy-go-lucky, that it puts you in a good mood every time you hear it. So could that joy and the record's success overall overcome this turmoil? Stick around and find out. The story's coming up on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you've ever looked up anything in the World Book or Britannica Encyclopedia, if that was your Wikipedia growing up, you're going to dig this daily channel of musical nostalgia. Make sure that you subscribe below right now, click the big red button, and check the notifications to get our latest interviews and stories. We also have a Patreon. You're going to want to check that out. You're going to find additional exclusive content there. You can even become an honorary producer that helps us to curate this music history. So today, we're going to cover a beautiful, joyous song from a classic band's second most successful album from a very dark period in their extensive yet dramatic history. The 1987 hit Everywhere from Fleetwood Mac. It's from their 1987 album, Tango in the Night. It's a song written by the late Christine McVie. August 7th, 1987, it's one of the most infamous days of Fleetwood Mac's long and storied career. Having released Tango in the Night 4 months prior, on April 13th, the band had been fighting over how to put together a tour, to support the record. Lindsey Buckingham, in particular, he was exhausted from his time with the band and was eager to get back to his solo career. So after the band had started booking gigs, he announced that he was done, effectively. Concerned about how losing a key member would affect that upcoming tour, the rest of the band, they were trying to change his mind. Feeling like he'd at least, owed his bandmates an explanation, so Lindsey agreed to a meeting at Christine's home. However, while the conversation got heated and years of anger and resentment shot to the surface, Stevie Nicks was the first to strike. Literally. Said Stevie, "I flew off the couch and I flew across the room to seriously attack him." And I did. I'm not real scary, but I grabbed him, which almost got me killed. End of quote. Realizing just what a bad idea it was for her to do that, Stevie Nicks ran out of the room with Buckingham giving chase. Stevie then ran out of the house. She ran down the street, back up the street again. I mean, it almost sounds comical, but really she was running for her life. There in Christine's courtyard, Lindsey caught Stevie Nicks, he slapped her, and he threw her against the hood of his car, with Stevie screaming obscenities. The rest of the band, they looked on in horror. Stevie said that in that moment, she thought she was going to die. Now, thankfully, the rest of the band managed to separate the two and try to calm things down. Buckingham turned to walk back inside to finish the discussion, but John McVie, he cut him off and he calmly told him, "You need to leave." Furious, Lindsey had a few choice words for his bandmates. And for 15 minutes, he just sat in his car before he finally drove off. Fleetwood Mac was officially down to 4 from that moment on. Mick Fleetwood called it a pretty wild story, and he's right. For better or worse, no one does band drama quite like Fleetwood Mac. Mick also called this period in Mac's history dangerous and not a happy time. And yet, in terms of commercial success, the Tango in the Night era would be incredibly prosperous. In fact, the album is actually Fleetwood Mac's second biggest in global sales after 1977's Rumours. It also boasts one of the band's most popular songs, Everywhere. It's tallied about 750 million streams just between Spotify and YouTube. Everywhere is an infectious, glimmering, perfect pop masterpiece. I mean, it's a song that can lift you right out of a bad stretch or a sour mood. Can you hear me calling out your name? So, it makes me wonder, how could such a carefree song come out of such a volatile period in the band's history? So, you know what? Let's take a step back, try to get some answers on that. So after the release of 1982's Mirage, Fleetwood Mac fans would have to wait almost 5 years for the release of Tango in the Night. Burned out from creating 4 massive albums together, the Buckingham Nicks Fleetwood Mac lineup, they needed a break from each other. I mean, clear back to New Year's Eve in 1974, when this iteration of the band came together, they had seen more than their fair share of substance abuse and affairs and divorce and drama, infighting. So a hiatus, it was a welcome option. That's what happened after the conclusion of their Mirage tour that ended in October of 1982. Besides, each band member, except for John McVie, they wanted to fire up their solo careers, respectively. In 1983, Mick got a band together and released the album It's Not Me.
Not me, without you, I can't be.
Credited to Mick Fleetwood Zoo. 1984, Lindsey released Go Insane, which went to number 45 on the Billboard Albums chart. Its title track reached number 23 on the Hot 100.
So I go insane.
And then also in 84, Christine McVie released a self-titled album with the top 10 hit, Got a Hold on Me. Great song.
I got somebody's love, got a hold on me.
But if we're talking Fleetwood Mac's solo careers, I mean, without a doubt, Stevie Nicks was the breakaway star. In 1981, she had already released her solo debut Belladonna, which we covered just a little while ago. That included 2 top 10 collaborations with Tom Petty and Don Henley. It also included the number 11 hit Edge of 17. Stevie then released The Wild Heart in 83 and Rock a Little in 85, and both were highly successful. They reached number 5 and number 12. Now, as we continue to break down this song and this part of Fleetwood Mac's career, I do want to thank our sponsor, Spry Dental Defense, made by Clear. Yeah, I've talked about the lifesaver that Clear's nasal spray has been, back when I had a cold, and how I now use it as a preventative. Well, then I found out that Clear has other amazing products like Spry Gum. Spry Gum also contains xylitol. Chewing it will boost your dental health in many ways. It fights tooth decay and prevents cavity formation by getting rid of the bacteria in your mouth that cause cavities. The truth is, fluoride simply remineralizes the enamel and does nothing for the bacteria creating the acid, and that's backed by scientific data. Best thing about this, though, is it tastes great. I love chewing it because no matter what I've eaten, I pop a piece in and it makes my mouth so clean it feels like I just brushed my teeth. I have fresh breath the rest of the day. Click on the link below or right up here, the info button, to get Spry Gum today, and make sure to leave a comment on Amazon. Spry Gum. So as far as solo careers, for everyone in the band not named Stevie Nicks, it was clear that Fleetwood Mac, it was the real moneymaker no matter what. And it was only a matter of time before the old gang got back together to, give another go. Even if it was a disaster just waiting to happen. Not that disasters weren't already happening. I mean, for one, Mick Fleetwood had to file for bankruptcy in 1984. He'd lost something like $8 million from a series of bad investments. Substance abuse was also running rampant among some of the band members. And in the case of Stevie Nicks, her addiction to cocaine had spiraled out of control. Her frequent use of the drug had reportedly carved out a dime-sized hole in her nasal septum, threatening her physical health as well as her vocal abilities. Shortly after completing a 6-month tour in 1986, Stevie Nicks checked into the Betty Ford Center in Rancho Mirage, California, to do a rehab stint. Some really crazy stuff was going on individually. But what finally jump-started a reunion was actually a Christine McVie side project that happened in 85. As she invited Lindsey, John, and Mick to all play on her cover of Can't Help Falling in Love. It was for the 1986 movie A Fine Mess. Said Christine about the project, it was the first time for nearly 5 years that we'd all been in a working environment together. We had such a good time in the studio, and we realized that we still had something to give each other in musical terms after all. So they all decided to do another album together. Well, maybe not all. Stevie Nicks, as I noted earlier, was preoccupied touring and battling addiction. So she was MIA for most of the recording process, actually. She actually mailed demos to the band instead. Now, toward the end, she did drop in for a few weeks, but it was a small contribution. But even more critically, Lindsey wasn't entirely sold on the idea. And by the end of '85, he was knee-deep into his next solo album, and he'd already finished 3 songs, Big Love, Family Man, and Caroline. However, after some persuasion had relented, said Lindsey, I had a choice of either continuing on to make the solo record or to sort of surrender to the situation and try and make it more of a family thing. And I chose the latter. Those 3 tracks, they all ended up on Tango in the Night. But from his perspective, Lindsey's perspective, this was his last stand with Fleetwood Mac. And as soon as the album was done, it was back to his solo career. Now, Tango in the Night was cut at Rumbo Recorders in the San Fernando Valley. Later, mixing and overdubbing, that took place at Lindsey Buckingham's home studio. For the album, Buckingham played the role of co-producer along with Richard Deschet. Early on, Lindsey was actually pretty optimistic. He stated that they felt like a band again. However, by the time it was over, he'd be telling a much different story. Now, the process of creating the album, that took a grueling 18 months, and as things progressed, it started to feel like maybe 5 years between the albums wasn't long enough. Buckingham was obsessive in the studio. He was growing increasingly frustrated with all of his bandmates. John McVie was a little bit rusty. For a while, he couldn't play his parts properly. Christine McVie often found herself on the outs of the creative process, and Mick and Stevie, they were both wrestling with substance abuse, which was something that Lindsey Buckingham wanted nothing to do with. In fact, when they moved to his home studio to finish the album, he actually parked a Winnebago in his driveway, and he told the 2 of them to keep any drug-related activity out there and not in his house. It was a very chaotic period for the band, and tensions were running really high. But somehow Fleetwood Mac, as they always do, they managed to finish the album, and with flying colors. Like I said before, their efforts, they paid off. Tango would prove to be an enduring work of art. Stronger and really more polished than his predecessor, it peaked at number 7 on the US charts, stayed in the top 40 for almost a year. In the UK, it hit number 1, and it stayed in those charts for almost 2 years as well. Replete with hits, Tango launched 6 singles. 4 of those went to the top 20 in the Hot 100. Big Love, written by Buckingham, was the leadoff single, and that went to number 5. Great start. Next, the Stevie Nicks penned 7 Wonders. That reached number 19. After that, 2 Christine McVie singles were released back-to-back. Little Lies scored a number 4 ranking, the biggest hit from the album.
Tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies.
And of course, today's featured song, Everywhere, came in at number 14. And although neither of the last 2 singles, Family Man and Isn't It Midnight, fared well, the album was already a massive success. Let's get into Everywhere, which for my money is a perfect Fleetwood Mac pop song. It's one of their standout tracks from the 80s in my mind. It's actually the only song on Tango in the Night on which Christine McVie received sole writing credit. Little Lies would actually be co-penned with her then husband, Eddie Quintella, and her 3 other compositions were co-written with Lindsey. I think one of the reasons Everywhere is such an endearing track is because it's so much fun to sing along to. I mean, Christine McVie had this remarkable intuition when it came to writing pop songs. I mean, whether you're talking about You Make Lovin' Fun, Don't Stop, Say You Love Me, Hold Me, or Everywhere, it's clear she was a master of her craft. Christine was also very grounded and straightforward with her writing. That made for a compelling counterpoint to Stevie Nicks' more mystical approach. Together, their distinctive and contrasting styles, it gave the band a multi-layered, almost tactile musical texture. The glistening backing track on Everywhere, that came about largely thanks to Lindsey Buckingham, who had a knack for coaxing unexpected sounds out of his guitar. And by this time, He had a Fairlight synthesizer that he'd used for sampling, and he also mixed toy pianos and zithers in the track, and that gave it a very different sound, a very distinct sound. In 2019, producer Richard Dashut briefly talked about the intro. He said that it was a half-speed acoustic guitar and electric combined. Christine also talked about the song's intro, remembering that Lindsey Buckingham had slowed the tape down really slowly and played the parts even more slowly. And then when it came back to the right speed, it just sounded bloody amazing, as she said. Another insight that's kind of interesting into the creation of the song is that the early version didn't harmonize with Stevie Nicks like we're accustomed to hearing, like she had in the past. Stevie actually had recorded some harmonies for the track, and I guess she melded them in. But later, when she discovered they hadn't been used on the song, this led to a very heated argument between her and Christine McVie. However, Christine sternly reminded her that since she hadn't bothered to show up for the session, she really didn't get a say in the matter. I mean, what did she expect? But you know what, to her credit, Christine McVie, she took the high road and she put Stevie's vocals on the track after all. So the one that we hear has Stevie in there. And I think this song is better off for it. It gave it a more balanced sound if you compare the two. With her vocals added, Stevie Nicks was pretty happy with the song. And later when talking about it, she gave Christine some high praise. She said, "It just shows you that Christine is the hit songwriter in Fleetwood Mac." And most people didn't realize until Christine passed away in 2022 that Christine McVie actually wrote or co-wrote the most hits of any of the legends in this supergroup. Actually, twice as many. She's just one of a kind. Lyrically, Everywhere, it's pretty simple, but I tell you, the way that Christine expresses those lyrics with her voice, so rich with depth and meaning. In the song, she captures this blissful sense of falling head over heels in love with somebody. That feeling when you first fall in love and you feel absolutely invincible. It's an incredible expression of those emotions, especially when she gets to that golden chorus.
I wanna be with you everywhere.
She may not have written a better vocal hook than the one here, and she's written some perfect vocal hooks, some really good ones. She's just magic. The music video is directed by Alex Proyas, and the music video for Everywhere, actually, it doesn't feature the band at all, which maybe isn't surprising since it was released after Lindsey left. Instead, what we get is the visual portrayal of the poem, The Highwayman. For those unfamiliar with The Highwayman, it's a romantic ballad written by Alfred Noyes. Set in 18th century England, the poem tells the story of an unnamed highwayman who is in love with Bess, a landlord's daughter. Betrayed to the authorities by a jealous stableman, the highwayman escapes an ambush when Bess sacrifices her life to warn him. After learning of her death, he seeks revenge, but is shot down in his attempt. And at the poem's conclusion, the ghosts of the lovers are reunited once again in death, which, for the music video gives the line, "I want to be with you everywhere," an entirely new meaning. It's pretty cool. As I said, Everywhere just missed out on the top 10. It reached number 14. I think it was shortchanged. This is definitely a top 10 hit in my book. However, it did claim the number 1 spot in the adult contemporary chart. Internationally, Everywhere also went to number 13 in South Africa. It went to number 4 in the UK, number 3 in the Netherlands, number 2 in Ireland, and it went to number 1 in Belgium and Canada. And as I said before, it has over 750 million streams, which actually puts it ahead of almost every song ahead of it in the countdown for that week since its peak. Over the years, Everywhere has appeared in a few different movies and TV shows, including SPF 18, Dumb and Dumber 2, the other one, Hollywood Stargirl, and The Goldbergs. Everywhere has also been featured in a few commercials, from clothing ads to moonwalking ponies. to more recently electric cars.
You know that I'm falling and I don't know what to say.
Everywhere, it's been covered by Shaka Khan.
Can't you hear me calling out your name?
A Vampire Weekend. One Republic, Niall Horan and Anne Marie.
I wanna be with you everywhere.
And Paramore. So let's get back to post-Tango. After Lindsey Buckingham sped away from the band that fateful August day back in '87, Fleetwood Mac had to find a way to go on without him. Not wanting to cancel their upcoming tour, they started to look for a replacement guitarist. And as it turned out, they found two, Billy Burnett and Rick Vito. And in September of '87, the new lineup hit the road. Fleetwood later claimed that hardly anyone on the tour noticed that Buckingham was gone. But whether the band wanted to admit it or not, I think they definitely felt Lindsey's absence. The Buckingham Nicks is a phenomenal era. The most phenomenal era of Fleetwood Mac. After that, Fleetwood Mac would release two Lindsey-less albums in the 90s, Behind the Mask in 1990 and Time in 1995. Neither of those are counted among Fleetwood Mac's best work, of course, but Buckingham would come back, and he even made his peace with Stevie Nicks. But then they were at odds yet again when the Mac replaced Buckingham with Mike Campbell, the producer, guitarist, co-writer from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and of course Neil Finn of Crowded House, two guitarists again. The bad blood continues, though hope remains that one of the greatest bands in history can mend, especially with the recent passing of Christine McVie. Life is just too short for such turmoil. Guess we'll see. Maybe we can get into the details of what happened after Tango in the Night on a future episode. Let me know below if you want to see that. With Fleetwood Mac, there's always another story to tell. But I think a good note to end on is this. For an album marked by so much drama, it really is amazing to me that a song like Everywhere could rise to the surface. It's just such a joyful slice of pop perfection. It's a credit to Christine McVie's constancy and creative brilliance that she was able to write something so joyful and enduring while everything else around her was falling apart. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about Fleetwood Mac and Tango in the Night. What do you think about this album? What other songs should we cover from this album? What about Everywhere? What do you remember about this song? What are your memories that are tied to it? And I just want to continue to talk about Christine McVie, one of the greatest singers and songwriters of the rock era. Just let us know below. Let's have a great discussion about that. If you like our content, we do invite you to subscribe below. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.